Dion Sanderson's probably a top half championship centre back. You're not leaving that out.
I'm going to have to do all of that again.
Of their squad currently as is, I think they are slightly behind the other two.
The expectation has to be a top 2 finish.
Hello guys, welcome back to the Sportsman Untitled, and today we've got a League One special for you, and I've got 2 Birmingham City fans, including EFL expert Gab Sutton. Gab, how are you getting on?
I'm really well, thanks so much for having me.
That's an absolute pleasure as always, and Conor Keane here. How are you doing, Conor?
I'm very good.
Excited for the new season?
Absolutely.
We'll start with Birmingham because there's an awful lot going on at St Andrews, including a new manager in Chris Davis. Conor, let's start with you. How are you feeling about him in charge of your team heading into the League One season?
I think it's certainly a breath of fresh air for Blues because over however many years now we have gone the tried and tested route of either names or some people with like a lot of experience, and you know we sit here now knowing that it just hasn't paid off in one way or another. So I think to go down this route of like a young coach out to make a name for himself, like you know playing this brand of football with teams in like youth academies that the owners have wanted and want to deliver, and obviously you know the fans now want as well. I think it got me excited because the best thing about it was in the whole time that we needed a new manager, it was like his name didn't come up until the very last minute. And obviously when you know you hear a name, you do a bit of digging, and you see the stuff that's been come out about him in the press before, and it's just thinking, yes, this is someone who I can get behind, and I'm really excited for it.
Let's talk a bit about the Birmingham owners, Gab, because there seems to be an awful lot of positivity from Birmingham fans, but from an outside point of view, kind of playing devil's advocate here, they came in, Eustace was in charge, doing all right, they sacked him, probably mistakenly for Rooney, then the Tony Mowbray situation happened, now you're in League One. From an outside point of view, it doesn't seem to be going that well, but can you bring some positivity to this?
Yeah, I think first of all they are willing to communicate with fans. So I think financially we're probably in a more stable place than we were, and there's a bit more certainty, a bit more clarity. I do feel a little bit that Tom Wagner and Gary Cook, who's our CEO, they are quite commercially driven, and so they're not necessarily likely to really own up about some of the mistakes they've made, because they want to appeal to the sort of the Netflix audience, if you like, a little bit. But at the same time, I also feel like maybe there's an extent to which you kind of need that to succeed in modern football. So I can kind of live with that in a way. And to be fair, you know, they have made mistakes, but they've also invested heavily in the squad. And I think the long-term future is probably looking brighter than it was.
And talking of that investment this summer in particular, spent $1.5 million in that region on two goalkeepers.
If you look at the most expensive transfers in League One, I think there's 10 of them, and top 7 of them are Birmingham City signings. So it's like
no pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's not normal League One spending by any stretch, and it means they've got to go up and, if not win the league this season, right?
Yeah, I think the expectation's on. I don't think we can shy away from that. I think the expectation has to be a top 2 finish. Normally, I think for most teams in League One going into a season, you want to say top 6 is the expectation, you strive for top 2. But I actually think for Birmingham, top 2 probably is the expectation, just because of the quality of the squad. Conor, we were talking earlier about Hansen coming in on the left and in pre-season already looks like a really exciting direct wide player. We've got Alfie May, who scores 20 goals at this level consistently every season. We've got players like Paik Sung-ho and Koji Miyoshi, who are class above this level. Ethan Laird, Dion Sanderson's probably a top half championship centre back. So I think the squad is just there is an embarrassment of riches for this level. Now it's a case of making it count.
Well, Conor said it was printing money to get back Birmingham to get promoted to me last week.
For promotion, yeah.
Are you sticking with that?
I think so. I think like as you know, Gab has just said, the quality of the squad. Like, yes, they're like the players who were here last year and massively underperformed. Yes, it was a very, very weird year, but there is so much talent in that team, even with those who have stuck around. I mean, we've mentioned just then like Paik Sung-ho, Koji Miyoshi, not guaranteed to stay. Obviously, there's still so much, but if you can keep them in League One, it it should be a cheat code. Like, and I think with the quality that we're bringing in now as well on top of that, I just think compared to the rest of the division, it should be a huge gulf in class.
We've seen some good teams not get promoted from League One over the last few years in particular, though. What happens if it doesn't happen this year? Is that a worry to anyone, especially with the money you've been spending?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a worry in terms of like the owners, because there very well. We're supposedly trying to build a £2 to £3 billion sporting arena. So whether that's trying to ward off the likes of Burton Albion and all 11 respecting the world to Burton Albion. But I think. I don't worry. I don't worry in terms of have we got enough money. Maybe there might be certain challenges in terms of financial compliance or FFP, but obviously I think the expectation is to get promoted automatically this season. Hopefully they can do that.
Let's talk about another club who came down. We're used to talking about this club coming down into League One in Rotherham United. They've gone back to Steve Evans, haven't they, this summer? Well, the end of last season, actually, didn't they? It's been an interesting transfer window for them. They've made some great signings in the form of Johnson, Clark, Harris, and some really experienced players, Sean Raggett and other names like that. For me, they're the ones to watch it in this League One so far. Would you agree with that, Gab, or are you not quite as keen on them as I am?
I don't know if I am going to be as keen on Rotherham as a lot of neutrals. I can definitely see the appeal because you've got a manager in Steve Evans who knows how to win promotion. You've got a goal scorer in Johnson Clark Harris who, when he plays regularly, he's always scoring 20, 25 goals at this level. But I'm also a little bit maybe apprehensive that off the back of last season where it's like they only collected a few more points than they did in 16-17, which was one of the worst second-tier teams of all time. So they are kind of building a bit from scratch a bit. I also have a thing with Johnson Clark Harris, which is, while he's an amazing goal scorer, I think for a low possession side that a Steve Evans team has, I actually worry that if he's going to be aggressive enough against the ball and whether there's going to be certain challenges that come with that. So that would be a slight a bit of a tactical thing for you there. But I do like the signing of Joe Rafferty and Sean Raggett. I think they're a really solid additions. So they'll certainly be expect to be in the conversation. But I'm maybe a little bit more apprehensive about them than others.
Evans obviously did great work at Stevenage, got them promoted, and then was having them challenging in League One as well before switching to Rotherham. Are you kind of seeing him as an experienced head? He's the complete opposite to the Birmingham manager, isn't he?
Well, I think that's why I think you and others think Rotherham are in for a good year. It's just that experience that Steve Evans brings, obviously the history that he's had at the club in the past, the success he had then. I think that is what is getting a lot more people rather than the signings, even though the signings themselves have been impressive with a lot of League One experience. I think Steve Evans is the decisive factor in thinking, Rotherham are going to give this a really good go this year. It's
a really experienced squad and an experienced manager, so it'll be interesting to see how they go. The other team that came down from the Championship, Huddersfield Town, Michael Duff coming in there. What are your thoughts on Duff at the moment, Gab? Because he was a great success at Cheltenham, and then it obviously didn't work out too well at Swansea, and now he's dropped back down to Barnsley. He had Barnsley, Huddersfield. We've got all my teams confused. He did well at Barnsley, playoff final, right?
Yeah, sure.
Then he failed a little bit in the Championship, got sacked too soon at Swansea. Now he's back in League One with Barnsley.
With Huddersfield. You're not leaving that out.
I'm going to have to do all of that again. Michael Duff is manager of Huddersfield Town. How's he going to get
Are we clear on that? For me, I think Michael Duff is the best manager in League One. I'm a massive fan of him. I think he did, like you say, outstanding work at Cheltenham, transformative work at Barnsley in a very short space of time. I think it didn't quite work out at Swansea because there was maybe a bit of a clash of stylistic ideals. I don't think that's going to be a problem for him at Huddersfield. I think his get the ball forward quickly style of play. I think he can coach some pretty good patterns of play. He's by no means a long ball manager, but I think there's going to be a good fit there. I think culturally it's going to be a good fit with what the fans want. So I'm excited about Michael Duff. But the big challenge for me that Huddersfield have is they only released about 5 players from a relegation, and they've got a massive squad. And I think the challenge that comes with that is sometimes after a relegation, you want to offload a lot of players and have a big clear out. I don't really think Huddersfield have got the scope for that, so I'm a little bit worried whether their squad's actually going to be a bit too big, and actually it's going to be maybe the next year where Duff's able to, if he gets the next year, because management is such a short-term thing, but whether...
He'll be at Barnsley by then again.
Yeah, exactly, But I think the size of the squad is a bit of a concern for me, but for me, they've got the best manager in the league.
Would you suggest that they've got the lowest expectations coming down out of Birmingham, Rotherham and Huddersfield?
I probably would say that, especially with what Gab has just touched on there. I think it's the playing squad overall that is obviously the most concerned with them. Obviously, you've got Rotherham with the tried and tested players, the very experienced manager at that level. And obviously Birmingham, yes, unproven manager, but a squad that, on paper is far above its, level. Huddersfield, I don't think their business is obviously nowhere near finished. So I think it's hard to gauge them right now, considering what they've got so far. But I think of their squad currently as is, I think they are slightly behind the other two have come down.
And looking at experience, and we talk about this a lot, which manager, Evans, Duff or Davis, do you trust the most in a promotion battle? What are you on someone?
I think I would go with Duff, because I do, like Gab touched on as well, it's like I do think he's a very good manager. Obviously harshly let go of Swansea, because obviously the Swansea way, it's it's very stubborn. But you get him in a culture of a club that are willing to accept his style of play and build on it and grow with it. Like Huddersfield, I think, should be willing to do that. I think the fans are going to be on board with it. I think he can deliver. Steve Evans, obviously, he's got the track record of experience, but obviously it's not like you don't want to call him like he's starting to become a dinosaur, but you think like that's his methods are kind of going to be starting to trump now by, obviously, you've got Duff's aggressive and fast forward thinking kind of play, and obviously with Chris Davies now, who's obviously trying to implement and build out from the back, progressive, obviously untested. So it's like I can't have him top, because at this sort of level he hasn't been tested as a manager. But yeah, I am sticking with Duff in terms of like the candidates to be most equipped at the moment.
Evans has obviously done really well at Stevenage lately. Just to go back to him, sorry,
sure.
It seems like he really benefits from a club where it's kind of backs against the wall, underdogs fighting.
Yeah.
In this case, he's back at Rotherham where he's had success in the past.
Sure.
It feels like Rotherham are one of the favourites here. Could that work against him in terms of style of play, in terms of aggression, in terms of the way he wants his players to go about things?
Yeah, I think if I look at... I think Michael Duff, his sides do like to get the ball forward early, but they also... so when he was at Barnsley, he had a number 6 called Luke Connell, who they'd sometimes play through, and they'd be able to play through the press quite well, and they'd have some pretty good patterns of play, and they'd use combinations in wide areas and things like that. So whereas I think with Evans, it very much is get you the early ball into the main striker and go from there, and he likes 5-3-2 or sometimes 4-4-2 diamond, but he likes to kind of condense the middle of the pitch and have really strong runners up top. I think that can work. I'm a little bit apprehensive about whether that's going to work at the top of League One, because League One I think is a different level. I think a few years ago you had sides like Burton Albion or even Yeovil who were able to do well. Now I think Rotherham have got a bit more quality than the sort of underdogs at this level. But I do think that stylistically, financially, League One is a much more competitive league, and I think that's coming into the management. And whether Steve Evans can remain competitive with some of the new ideas that are coming into League One, I'm a little bit unsure about.
And we'll drop down to look at the contenders now. We've discussed the relegated teams from the Championship. For the second season in a row, remarkable, I love this stat, Bolton, Barnsley and Peterborough lost in the playoffs for the second consecutive season. They're likely to be contenders around that top 10 again, you would think. Amazing quirk. Bolton, we'll start with Bolton. 87 points last season. Quite unfortunate not to go up. We're outclassed in that playoff final by Oxford. Gab, it feels like a bit more of the same. They're staying with Everett. They've not lost too many names. You're expecting them to go well again?
Yes, with the caveat that I still would like to see more additions for Bolton. I definitely think they need upgrades in the wing-back areas, but I think one of the reasons they didn't get top 2 ahead of Derby last season was because, firstly, when Nathan Baxter, their crucial goalkeeper, got injured, or was it suspended? I'm not sure. It became unavailable anyway. They struggled because the other goalkeeper they had wasn't quite at the level. They've now brought in Luke Southwood from Cheltenham, who I think is a much more reliable backup, so I think that's a big plus. And then they've also strengthened defensively, so let's say Ricardo Santos gets injured, which he did at one point last season, they've got somebody like Chris Farino step in, and they've got George Johnston back fit as well, so defensive depth, they're stronger. So those two key areas that cost them automatic promotion, they're stronger in. And I just think in terms of the wing-back areas, they need to strengthen because they're strong defensively, they're strong in goal, they've got a good collection of strikers, including Dion Charles. For me, it's the wing-backs where I really want to see a couple of additions coming in.
It felt like Evert's one of his key tactics was just to change that front two last season. I think he did it in the playoff final. I think Jerome's left now, Bolton. In terms of those forward options, are you still happy with them that they can compete at the top of League One then?
So they've got Dion Charles, just testing my knowledge here. Dion Charles, Dan Lundley,
Collins,
thank you, and I think they might have one more. I think they've got some good strikers. I'm pretty sure they've got 4 of them there. So I think they'd be pretty happy there. For me, it's the wing back areas. I think Josh Cogley is a very athletic, can get up and down, but maybe is he technically quite at the level they're going to need? Randall Williams, I'm not 100% on. Whereas I look at the midfield, they've got Josh Sheehan there, who I'm a big fan of. George Thomason I quite like as well. They've got Carl Dempsey, who's always been one of the better midfielders in the league. So for me, I think the basics are there. They just need 2 or 3 additions to finish things off, and because they need to make sure that they keep things fresh and they give opposing teams something different to think about, and they don't just assume that they can do what they did last year, because they weren't great in the playoff final. They didn't really turn up, so they've got to change that a little bit this season, but pretty confident for them.
And how about Barnsley, Conor? They've gone for Darrell Clarke as their manager, who is definitely a decent option in League One. They obviously had that weird end to the season where they sacked the manager in the playoffs and then tried to battle their way through. That was a brilliant semi-final, wasn't it?
Yeah, sure.
Against Bolton. They've signed a couple of experienced heads. Mark Roberts has gone there, Birmingham player. Can they go again? Are you thinking they can be in the top 6, or are they going to?
I think they'll definitely give it a go. I mean, I think, as I was saying earlier about like another club and another manager, I think the manager is the reason for why I think Barnsley are in for a good year. I think Darrell Clarke is a very good manager at this level. Obviously, in recent years he probably hasn't had a club where he has had the expectation of like pushing for like a playoff place, but I do think he's a very astute coach at this level, and I think he has the potential to get Barnsley back in there. But obviously, I think I'm more sceptical because I think I need to see more from their transfer business to really hit that home.
I'm a little bit apprehensive about Barnsley because I think they've lost 6 regular starters from last season, which obviously sets them back a little bit. The recruitment's been a bit slow. I don't see Conor Hourihane and Mark Roberts being more than a dressing room / get the fans going kind of signings. I think they're a little bit past their best, personally. And I also have reservations. I think Darrell Clarke's a very good manager in League 2. And I think in League 1, I think he can be a very good, effective firefighter. I think his main strengths are that he's a good man manager and very intuitive with his in-game management. He's able to change games very quickly. But as a coach, I also think he's a little bit limited. And I think for this rebuilding stage for Barnsley, where they've got to try and develop a few assets and they've got to rebuild the squad a little bit after successive top 6 finishes, they're not really going to have the money to compete with the biggest budgets in the league. I don't know if he's quite the right person for that task. So Barnsley have said they want to go with a younger group this season, and Darrell Clarke's a manager who's always favoured experience. So I feel like they've appointed the CV and not necessarily the manager, if you like.
And we're used to Peterborough selling a key player every now and again, but this summer feels like it's been a summer of quite a few major losses. When you look at Ronnie Edwards gone, Mason Clark they had on loan and he's permanently gone now. Harrison Burrows looks like he's going to Sheffield United. Then also you can consider Clark Harris has finally moved on and left the club. It feels like a massive transition season for Peterborough, even though they're signing those young players again.
I mean, obviously the group of players that you've just mentioned that are gone, like they're going to be huge losses, and it's like to replace them immediately is going to be a huge task. They're probably not as nailed on as they probably were a year ago, this time a year ago, talking about the season ahead. But I still have faith in the model that they have of finding these replacements. I mean, it may not happen overnight, but Peterborough I think will still give it a good go, even if it is kind of pushed to the very end of them trying to get a playoff place. But I think obviously Ferguson, you know what you're going to get with him there at Posh. The experience he has, obviously the way he wants them to play, the players that will remain will still be buying into what they're obviously trying to achieve. But I think trying to replace those key players, I think that is whether that will determine whether or not like Peterborough give it another.
They get developed, don't they, over a few years, and then they make the step up, which tends to happen. But Chris Clark is one I'm very excited about from Altrincham. Do you think he's the next on the kind of ladder? Obviously, we can't expect him to be a star straight away.
Yeah. That's kind of, you've taken the words out of my mouth there, Simon, because I think you're replacing someone like Ephron Mason-Clark. Now, to be fair, Mason-Clark did come in from Barnet mid-season in 22-23 and he was an instant hit. So they will be hoping that the same can be true of Clark. But it's a 2-division jump, and I think it's one thing to ask for a sort of a middle-eight side to sort of ask someone to make that step up and allow for a bit of inconsistency. But for someone that's supposedly an aspiring promotion contender, is he going to be able to hit that same consistency right from the off? I think that's a bit of an ask. Again, Harrison Burrows, they look likely to lose. Ronnie Edwards, they've lost to Southampton as well. George Nevitt, they've signed from Rochdale as a centre-half. I think he's a good long-term investment, but it's, can they step up straight away? Got a great manager in Darren Ferguson, and we've doubted Peterborough and the state of their squad before, and Darren Ferguson's made us look silly because he is that great a manager. So I think he's a massive asset for them, but I think this could be one of the toughest seasons that he's had.
Absolutely, and we'll take a look at the 4 teams coming up from League 2 now. There's a couple of big names that could go fairly well in terms of Stockport, who obviously won the league. Dave Challoner proving himself to be an excellent manager, seeming to be at every level he's been at so far. Them and Wrexham coming up with probably the biggest expectations. They've signed Lewis Fiorini?
Fiorini, yeah.
From Man City's youth academy, and also Corriadai from Crawley, which is a decent addition in my eyes. Is mid-table the expectation for them this season, or do we think they can go higher and continue this rise that is just continuing at Edgley Park?
I think there's 2 different answers to that. I sound like a politician there, don't I? I think there's 2 different answers, because I think Mark Stott, the owner, I've heard sort of whispers that the club actually feel like themselves they'll want to be challenging for the playoffs. I'd be surprised if that's true in the fan base, because I expect that they were in the National League North as recently as 2019, so for them to come into League One and say we should be competing with Birmingham City is probably a bit of a stretch maybe, but so I think from the fan base there's definitely a feeling of we're happy to develop. And to be fair, when you look at the players they've invested in, a lot of them are younger players that they feel like have some long-term growth, so they've made some quite brave calls in terms of offloading the likes of Ryan Crowsdale or the likes of Paddy Madden, for instance, who had been really influential in their journey, because they feel like they want to go with players who can take them to that next step. So I think they've made some really exciting investments, and they're one of the teams that I can't wait to see in League One next season.
And I was surprised when I looked at the odds to see that Wrexham are the 4th favourites to win the league. They've had a relatively quiet window so far. When you compare it to the likes of Birmingham City splashing the cash, maybe we would expect that from Wrexham. They've got goalkeeper Arthur Nkonkwo on a permanent deal after he was brilliant on loan last season, wasn't he?
Great buy, yeah.
It's now 2 automatic promotions in 2 seasons, Connor. Is the Ryan Reynolds train going to hit a bit of a bump this season, or is it just going to keep on running?
Yeah, I think this is where they'll find it the toughest so far, because obviously the quality of the teams that they're coming up against, like obviously they'll look at Birmingham and they'll be like, right, yeah, it's like we've kind of had it our own way the last couple of years, and now we're coming in when we're going to be stepping on someone else's shoes in terms of like finances. I think that they could have a good year, but right now I don't think that they're going to be like the momentum will be as good as it has been in the last year, like with the back-to-back promotions. They have made some interesting signs. Obviously, the goalkeeper you've just mentioned, George Dobson as well. I think he'll be a good presence in that team. And yeah, for me, I kind of have them in sort of like the middle of the pack right now, like the way things are. But obviously, that could suddenly change. They could make a flurry of signings later on in the window, and you think, oh, actually, like that could then push them like 5 places higher.
It's funny, isn't it? Because they signed, when they're in the National League, they signed Paul Mullin, who had been top goal scorer in League 2. So now they're in League 1, you're almost wondering, are they going to sign a recent Premier League player? You just never quite know what they're going to be able to bring it to in the transfer window.
So do you think the 4th favourites tag that they've got at the moment is pure hype, pure excitement?
I think it's probably a bit of a reputability. Is that how you... Anyway.
We can make that a word.
Yeah. But I think there's a bit of that where Wrexham's a name that people are familiar with, and therefore more people are likely to bet on them, and therefore that's going to influence the markets, and that's how the industry tends to work. So I wouldn't necessarily take it as Wrexham are fourth favourites, therefore they're the fourth likeliest to win promotion. I don't think it's quite like that.
And Mansfield are back at this level for the first time in about 20 years, I think. Am I right? They spent 11 consecutive seasons in League Two. I think I spent about 5 seasons saying Mansfield are going up this year. It just didn't happen. But it did happen last year, third place. Gab, is it just survival needed for Mansfield this season, or can they be a bit more ambitious?
I think so. I think it's just about survival, because I look at Stockport and they've brought in players who can kind of grow with the step up. I don't necessarily see that with Mansfield. Kini Bakus, by the way, is a great signing. So he's got some incredible reviews from Australasia and from Scotland. So brilliant pickup. Well done to their recruitment team for that. I think their core of key players in Christy Pym, Aidan Flint, Louis Reed and Davis Keeler-Dunn, if they keep hold of him, they're going to be really important. So half the team is looking really strong. I do have apprehensions about the other half, because a lot of it's late 20s, early 30s, early 40s in Stephen Quinn's case. A lot of it's players that don't necessarily have that same growth potential, and I have certain question marks, I guess, about whether there's going to be an overvaluing of experienced players and versatile players over players that maybe have a bit more growth potential or are very good in their best position. So I'm not 100% on Mansfield, and I think survival would represent a good season for where they're at.
And a word on Nigel Clough as well. Conor, obviously earlier in his career he had experience higher up the pyramid. He's been at Mansfield now in League Two for a few years, finally got them promoted. He's a manager vastly experienced, but you think he'll cope well with the step up?
Yeah, I mean, I think he does, because obviously, you know, he does have experience at this level, and obviously higher. I think like that, you know, to a manager like that, that's so valuable. And obviously, you know, for the reasons that Gab says, I think the aim is going to be survival for them. But you know, because I think that highly of him as a coach and a manager, especially for like his career and like the last decades. I think that he has more than enough from his own experiences to be able to like get them to stay up, and obviously to get Mansfield to stay up in League One after so long away, like that as a stepping stone for like future growth and success could be huge. And right now I think there are teams that are already in League One that are probably like worse off than them currently. So yeah, I think they have it in them to stay up.
It's difficult with the 4 teams going down in League One, obviously, but one team that already looks like they're in a bit of trouble is the playoff winners from League Two last season. Just in terms of the players they've lost, seems like other teams are offering them more money, and there's quite a few of Crawley Town's key players jumping ship. Corey Adai, we've already mentioned.
Danilo Warsey.
Nick Sarula, and Will Wright as well, I think. There's a bunch of players basically from that promotion team that have left. Now they've got a decent manager, Scott Lindsay's proven himself, but he's not got much to work with at the moment, it doesn't seem.
Well, Liam Kelly as well is another one who's going to be a massive loss for them. I thought he was outstanding in the playoff final, wasn't he? So I think it's going to be tough for Crawley. I think there's still reservations about them from an ownership perspective, despite the brilliant work that Scott Lindsay did. And he's done a wonderful job from a man management point of view and as a coach. I do think it's going to be a big challenge for them. I think Flint, the lad they've signed from Holland, I think looks like an exciting addition at the back. But yeah, I think it's going to be a big test.
And when we're looking at Crawley, I mean, that's a team that were favourites to get relegated from League Two last season. When we was probably sitting having a similar conversation. Yeah. Now they're in League One and they've lost the key players they need.
That's the thing. Like, you know, the way I saw it, as soon as I saw like loads of these like outgoings happen, I was just thinking, you know, from an outsider looking in, if you didn't know that Crawley were promoted, you'd think they were just relegated. And I think to have that so early on in the transfer window as well, it's like such a big blow to the fans, who obviously they knew going into the season that obviously, yes, we had an excellent year. Like, you know, we're in League One, you know, we've defied the odds. But now, obviously, seeing how it's unfolded after that playoff final, you just think, yeah, it's become so much more harder now. And yeah, you do really worry for the season. It could be very, very, very underwhelming.
And we'll finish with a few quick-fire questions here. The 3 promoted teams from League One last season, Portsmouth, Derby and Oxford. I want to get your opinion on them, how they fare in the Championship this coming season. Do any of them stay up for you, Conor? I'll start with you.
I think Derby have a good chance, because obviously Paul Warne does have, like, not an abundance, but he does have experience at the level. And I just think because of their like own history, I think like they will be able to like bring some more players in to add to their squad and help them. Portsmouth, I have a slightly good feeling about, but just purely because of what I've seen from Mousinho so far as a coach. Like, he's really impressed me, even though I do think they will find it tough in the first year especially. Oxford, I'm the most concerned about, just because the way I saw it, I think like Des Buckingham came in, like he got them to where they needed to be, and obviously did really well. Like, absolutely can't fault anything for the way they approached the playoff final. Like, completely played Bolton off the park. But I still am a bit concerned because obviously I think to a degree he did piggyback off the previous success of Liam Manning, and I think like he has still a way to go to prove that he is the man to take them forward. Like,
interesting.
Further than they've already.
It's the size of a club, and it's quite difficult heading into the Championship. Now, Gab, I know you've got some predictions coming out, so you can't say too much, but what can you give us on those three teams?
I think Oxford United, in theory, it's maybe harder to be bullish about them in terms of the manager situation, because John Mousinho and Paul Warne have done it over a full season. With Des Buckingham, actually the form for the first 4 months of his reign was sort of lower mid-table. Now, caveat that by saying there were lots of injuries in attacking and wide areas that would have contributed to that. But we're kind of judging Des Buckingham off the basis of a good 10 weeks or so, if you include the playoffs at the end of the season, which makes it a little bit more difficult to be too bullish about him. But I think he's got a great coaching background as well. He's made a difference to numerous clubs over the world in his 21-year coaching career so far. And I do like the recruitment as well of El Mazzuni, who's at Leyton Orient the last couple of years, Jack Curry at Wimbledon. I think they've made some exciting additions. So we'll see.
Interesting stuff. The next question I've got for you is one early League One signing that has caught your eye or has made you think, oh, he's going to be some player this season. Obviously, Birmingham have signed, half of Europe and half of the league. Have you got one for us, Conor?
And I'm not gonna say one of ours because I don't think to be selfish, but one for me is it's Huddersfield and it's Lasse Sorensen.
Okay.
I know he was very highly rated at Lincoln, and obviously I think he excelled last year, and I know how gutted the fans were to lose him this summer. So I have a lot of high hopes for him as like one of the more successful transfers this season.
How about you, Gab?
Well, you didn't say new signing, so
okay.
I'm going to give you a contract news, which is Wigan have tied Sam Tickle and Charlie Hughes down to long-term contracts, goalkeeper and centre-back respectively. They're both, I think, about 20, and I think they're among the most exciting players of their age group in the country. So I think for Wigan Athletic to tie them down to long-term contracts is really exciting, and I'm expecting their development to really shoot up next season after outstanding breakthrough campaigns last year. So Sam Tickle and Charlie Hughes for me.
Brilliant shout. I love I've seen Tickle a few times. He's been superb.
He's very, very good.
An experienced one for me, just because I've seen him play a lot. Liam Kelly going to Rotherham from Coventry on a free. I mean, he's a player that played in the Championship playoff final 2 seasons ago and didn't look out of place. His legs are going a little bit, but he's got the experience. He could still do a job in League One. I think he's going to be very good for that Steve Evans team.
Dressing room signing as well, yeah.
I mean, that's all Steve Evans is doing at the moment, isn't he? Signing 30-plus-year-olds. I'd like to hear, if we have a bit of time, your value pick for the early betting market. Now, this can be anything. Gab, we're not going to ruin your prediction, so maybe you stay out of this one. Conor, what do you think is going to happen?
I mean, I was torn between 2 teams to pick for like the top 6 finish. I mean, one of them might seem a bit outlandish right now, but one of them was Wycombe Wanderers. Like, I think they finished the season quite well, and it looked like things were starting to tick for Matt Bloomfield, obviously after like a tricky start into the job. And the other one was Lincoln, because I'm very impressed with their managers. Am I saying this right? Skubala,
I call him.
I think what he's done since he took over the job there has been very impressive, and I think that he will only build on that this year. So I think I'd have to lean with them, because obviously they obviously finished the season the more stronger of the 2 teams. But I think they were both 11-4 on Betfred, so I think that they're both in similar like range. So, but
is that top 6
for top 6? Yeah. So I think either of those two I think could be like decent dark horses for it, but I'd say Lincoln right now are probably more stronger to make a push.
Would you add anything to that, Gab, in terms of...
Yeah, I think without giving too much away, I think Lincoln and Wycombe are sides that I think will be somewhere, I'm going to sort of phrase it a little bit vaguely, but I think they'll be somewhere around there. So I would suggest that 11-4 on either of them I think would be a great price, yeah.
And I'll pick out, because I'm big on Steve Evans and I'm big on Rotherham signings. They're 9-1 to win the league, and I know Birmingham are making all these signings, but they've also got a new manager. It's making me have a few doubts. Going to have a slow start. I think Rotherham are going to be at it. I think they're going to be really tough to beat in every single game, and they're 9-1 to win the league. So that's my outside.
It is good
pick.
value. It is good value.
And it brings us to our winner of League One and the team that comes bottom. It's easy for me. I've already said Rotherham, I think, are going to win the league, and I think Crawley are going to finish bottom in quite a sad state of affairs, really. Connor?
Yeah, I just think for all the excitement, the signings so far, and the brand of football that they're obviously we're looking to bring, I think Blues they should win the league. Like, not
we've got it on camera now. That's all we needed.
Not ridiculously comfortably, but like I think there should be like a fair couple point gap for the.
Worth noting there, Connor, we've never won a league by more than 4 points in our entire history. So we've never done it the easy way. So
no, absolutely. But yeah, I say no more than 10-point gap. I'd say.
Okay.
But yeah, I think we can win it by a bit, but not greatly. And then Crawley rock bottom. I just think they just don't fill me with any confidence, especially with the players they've lost. I just think it's very, very tough for them.
You don't have to give us your winner or who finishes bottom, Gab, but for you, could you give me a team you are slightly concerned about maybe dropping off from last season, or a team that could fall towards the relegation zone? And we'll leave it as vague as that for you.
I think I'm a little bit apprehensive about Northampton, because they've lost Mark Leonard, and he was absolutely outstanding in the middle of the park. They've signed Cameron McGee, and I don't know that he's going to be quite as technical as Leonard was, so I still think that that's going to be a big area for them to replace. They've also lost Sam Sherring, who I really liked as well, Louis Apparay. So I'm a little bit apprehensive about Northampton. They'll argue that they've signed some of the replacements, but for me, Leonard is a big one, so I think it could be difficult for them.
Brilliant. Thank you very much both for joining me on this episode of the Sportsman Untitled. Blues are going up apparently, so that's a lot to be happy about.
That's what we want.
Gab's looking more concerned now we've said it out loud.
Trying to give a poker face.
Thank you very much for joining us, guys, for this League One preview, and we'll see you next time on the Sportsman Untitled.